Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, one and all, for this very power packed and exciting Tuesday afternoon. Thank you very much for registering for this important program on learning, which all of us now are very much aware and convinced that the learning which at some point in time we were told that it begins when you join your preschool days, and then every 3 years somebody comes and tells you that only next few years, and after that you will be free and you will not have to learn. But we know that is not the case anymore, right? And I very strongly believe that each and everyone on this call, and those who wanted to come but are still finding their seats, are the lifelong learners. And I think that's the key which all of us need to keep in mind. And to make that learning enjoyable, interesting, personalized, uh, and highly enriching for various things, including adding your skills, making you better employable, creating greater value for your employer. All those initiatives and aspects have been looked up by organizations like EdCast, by the organizations which are the learning and development departments in various organizations, and individual professionals who are passionate about learning as a game changing initiative for human beings. What I wanted to call out briefly in these few minutes is that since the advent of AI, there has been aspiration, I would say right now, because it's not a reality, that each and every individual, may it be a school-going child or may it be a professional, um, has a different way of learning, and for the sake of better word, the learning styles, and the L&D professionals who are on this call will agree that that is one of the key parameter which we use when we design learning content. So can we use the technology and tools to personalize the learning based on the individual learning styles, learning habits? And habits is a new word I would want to add, because the style is one part, the habit is another. And all of us, over a period of time, being in our own professional life, chose to have different ways through which we learn. And if technology can come in handy for us to accelerate and propel in the areas in which we want to grow, you will also notice that coincidentally, yesterday I was doing some analysis about the number of practitioners who have done badges, in a particular subset of the organization. And if the organization size is of, let's say, 6,000, 7,000, practitioners, I noticed that almost 70, close to 75 to 78% of them have taken some effort in adding, their skills. And this has happened without, the people being pushed around for learning, or they needing to, get into a very large conference room, or get, travel few hours and attend a session. But it happened uh, when they wanted, as they wanted, how much they wanted, how little they wanted, all of those requirements, and which particular skill they wanted. Because when I looked at the skill and industry spread, I noticed that there is somebody who is working in an automobile industry, but has acquired skills in financial services industry. There is somebody who is working in a chemical industry, but is wanting to acquire skills in the retail industry. And when I went a little bit deeper to understand why people have chosen these sort of completely or vastly different areas, a lot of convergence is happening. So the petrochemical person who is working in that industry maybe having deep expertise on the stuff as to how the rigs and the other things operate, but now he's curious to know how the after the after the refinement of the petrochemical is done, how does it reaches to the end customer like you and me on this call, and hence now has developed curiosity to learn about retail and distribution, how that industry work, and can I combine the expertise which I had with respect to the downstream of the operation, and try and bring that to improvise the customer experience in the upstream as well. So people are choosing to differentiate, people are choosing to follow their aspirations as well, and all of that becomes possible by way of coming up with new innovative ideas and events like the one which we are doing today. I want to wish great success to Team NHRDN as well as EdCast team for this event. NHRDN Pune chapter is blessed to have this opportunity to be around as a partner for this. Many of you on this call know that National HRD Network India is one of the biggest professional body of knowledge here in India, with more than 13,000 HR professionals as members, and very many leaders, industry stalwarts as the members and the thought leaders with us. And we invite some of you who are not members yet to consider join us, join shoulders for us to create the future of work which is upon us here and now. Okay, with that, I'll take a pause and hand it back to Avinash, our host, and the illustrious speakers who are going to speak after me. Thank you. Have a good rest of the day and happy learning, all of you. Take care. Avinash, back to you.
Thank you, Anand. Thank you for that welcome address. Very good afternoon to everyone. Hope everyone's healthy and keeping safe. Welcome to this session on learning health, which is an initiative by NHRDN and EdCast. My name is Nischay. I'm the president of EdCast for the EMEA region, which constitutes of the Africa market, Middle East, and Asia Pacific region. Let me begin by saying that this is an opportune time for us to collectively come together and deliberate how we can help organizations raise their learning proficiencies, deepen their learning proficiencies, such that we can bridge this very critical gap that is emerged in the area of skilling. This is a session targeted at creating not only a better version of ourselves, but also a different version of ourselves, given how the pandemic has altered um, work, the worker, and of course, the workplace. This session aims at highlighting some of the research findings that we've gathered through the last 1.5 years working with organizations in the area of learning, and then convening a conversation around what does that mean for us for corporate India, what actions need to be taken and very urgently to address this skilling gap. A few inspirational quotes that help set the stage, and I always believe that that broadens the horizon of our conversation. One, how do we cultivate an abundance mindset? That learning and development has always been criticized of only focusing on the areas of development or weakness, whereas we are all born with gifts and strengths, and how do we leverage those strengths at the workplace? Second, how do we recognize the good in others? And by doing so, really help us as individuals become better human beings. A third, clearly, is our gifts and what do we do with our gifts at the workplace? How can we cultivate those gifts, hone those strengths, and apply those strengths within the workplace? It is with that spirit in mind that EdCast actually launched the Learning Health Index, which is really the Dow Jones of skilling, if I may. It is a standard that one can measure up with, um, given where we are, where we want to move, and therefore what steps should be taken in that journey to bridge that gap. The Learning Health Index, and we'll share the research findings as the day proceeds, is really now a industry standard and benchmark that is being used by organizations to measure themselves against where they were and against where their competitors or fellow players are within the industry or within the market as a whole. Now, EdCast is a global leader in the unified talent experience space where we actually help organizations become smarter, become future ready with a focus on learning, skilling, and career mobility. And we're now actually not only working with Fortune 500 companies and Global 2000 companies, but also actually working with governments because governments have realized that really skill development is at the heart of transformation. And with the Government of India, a journey that we began in 2018 has now culminated into a citizen skilling platform called Future Skills Prime. And over these 2-3 years, where we work with academia, with corporates, and with now individuals and citizens, we have 1 million people wanting to upskill and reskill themselves because they recognize that they must become a better and a different version of themselves if they are to succeed in the new normal. LHI is a study that began with India, and this is the second year that we've run the study in India. But now, in fact, as we're having this session in India, the results of the Africa market are also being released. And shortly, you'd find results for Middle East and Europe and US also being released. So it's really a global property with a deep dive on learning proficiencies that are required for an organization to be able to achieve the new norms of performance or raise the bar on themselves in terms of performance at various levels. One, for individuals to really cope up with the bigger ask, the higher stress that they all witness in the workplace, and for organizations to really transform in this new normal. We saw that the pandemic really caused a acceleration in digitalization, in automation, and in the rapid scaling of work from home or remote working. So the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And it is with that intention that we work with corporates and organizations that how can we help accelerate the arrival of the future of work. Now, our next session is actually a very interesting one because I want to introduce Gianni Giacomelli. And while he can't join us in person, he did send in a recording from New York. He's the Chief Innovation Officer at Genpact. And EdCast and Genpact have worked very closely together for the last 3 years in this journey of transformation. And Gianni has, successfully led transformation of L&D at Genpact to drive employee reskilling and upskilling at scale through this project called Genome, and which is Genpact's corporate learning academy, which is powered by EdCast. And Genome today uses the EdCast platform to upskill over 100,000 employees across 25 countries, covering 77 skills across 4 proficiency levels. And here's a nugget which is the aha moment was for me, probably will be for you as well. Genome or Genpact employees clocked 9.37 million hours of learning in 2020, which is 2.5 times more compared to 2018. And Gianni's work on Reskilling ROI Model aims to further strengthen and justify the investments needed by L&D organizations. I warmly welcome Gianni to deliver the keynote session.
Nishay and Edcast and the organizers for inviting me to Keynote, the NHRDN Edcast Learning Health Index Summit 2021. When you meet CEOs and boards, they rarely question that reskilling is one of the most pressing challenges that their organization has. So why don't they routinely earmark significant funds, 5 times more than today, for a radical overhaul of traditional learning and development practices that were visibly built for another era and were increased from a small budget that was initially set in a world where the changes of skills weren't as fast as today, and the impact of people not having those skills wasn't as dramatic as today. So why is that? I think the answer is because the CEOs and boards haven't yet seen a proper estimate of the return on investment. And that investment hasn't come from the HR and learning community consistently enough to get that money reallocated. Lacking that business case, I believe the learning will continue to be seen as an important cost center, but not as a strategic capability that is worth reallocating millions of dollars into, unlike, for example, what happens with better sales forces or new product organizations. And look, of course, estimating the monetary return of learning may not be as easy as calculating the impact of, let's say, a new sales rep to the bottom line. But indeed, it is hard to harness academic models that exist, that have been there for quite some time, and really use them to derive conclusive insights from proper longitudinal data sets measuring learning adoption and effectiveness. So we cannot do that, but we can, at the same time, we cannot be happy with the status quo. So my contention and the work that my organization and I have done as part of the transformation of our learning capabilities is that we do have quite a few data points at our disposal today, not tomorrow, today, which you can assemble into some meaningful directional estimates. And I think it's high time to do it. This is what we attempted to do at Genpact, and it's also with the collaboration of our CHRO, Piyush Mehta, and our partners, including, importantly, Edcast. The results of what I'm going to talk about are going to be presented in a couple of slides in a moment, in the form of some estimates that are based on our own numbers. To put things into a little bit of perspective, Genpact is probably known to many of you as a professional services firm. We do digital transformation of large process operations. And we have about 100,000 employees, actually, as of today, a little more than 100,000 employees in 25 countries. Their job is to design, build, and then run our clients' processes. And all these things happen increasingly digitally. And the pace of that digitization is increasing, right? It's accelerating. So without reskilling, our people cannot express the collective intelligence that makes interdisciplinary, cross-functional teams solve problems. That's what we need today. We need people who are able to talk domain expertise, digital technology, analytics, design thinking, experience design, Lean Six Sigma. We need to bring them together. And those skills need to be imparted so that you have people who are really good at them, but also other people who are able to interoperate with the experts. Without reskilling, our young workforce also will take flight. People want to work for a company that gives them skills. And the numbers, sooner or later could become significant if we were providing that experience to our learners, to our employees. So we broke down the value of reskilling into 5 buckets with the respective drivers. And even with very significant, significant conservative assumptions, the numbers are really, really strong, really big, way bigger than frankly, the way we think about the impact. And so I'd like to share some of that with you today. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to build this as we go. So the first lever is the following, is internal redeployment instead of hiring. Well, when appropriate, redeploying internal resources instead of hiring is cheaper because of the cost of the hiring process, the cost of onboarding and training, and the likely higher salary of external hires. It is also possibly faster, which in our case, fielding people faster into jobs would result into faster revenue realization. Though we didn't model this last piece, but we model everything else, right? The other factors that we talked about. In our model, we assumed about 5% of the population could be in scope for redeployment every year, roughly the right number. And about 10, we would do that with about 10% of them, right? So we could really assume conservatively that 90% of people wouldn't make the cut, but 10% would. So that's the first number. The second number is reduced employee attrition. And so employee attrition in a recent LinkedIn survey was reported as a very, very significant component of the equation. So 45% of employees, give or take, those who don't feel that they are being trained, 45% of the employees who don't feel that they're being trained will leave. And backfilling them costs money. Right? In the model, we assume that superior training practices can shave about 10% off of that attrition trend. So we wouldn't be able to do anything with 90% of people, but 10% we would get them off the ledge, right? So that's number two. Number three is the lower cost of training. We have now better technologies that help move knowledge at radically different costs than in the past. And what we built on the back of the EdCast platform in the past, in the recent past, shows that that is possible. The same really applies to the cost of training, especially now that we can work from anywhere and we can make peer learning a reality. We observed that our own cost per hour imparted sunk with the new training operating model. It also yielded a much better targeting and granularity of instruction. We didn't model this factor in, but we did model the cost of learning. In our model, to be conservative, we assume that only 50% of that cost reduction would flow to the bottom line, which is a really, really conservative assumption. Next lever is improving the odds of digital transformation success. This is something that CEOs and boards, that's their job. Right? So these days, that's number one thing on their agenda. The number here is a bit of a strong assumption, but is really one that is worth parameterizing. McKinsey, for example, has observed that the success rate of digital transformation roughly doubles in companies that use advanced training and knowledge sharing practices. So it moved from 10-15% of success rates, which is actually fairly low, right, to about double that number. So for the sake of using a somewhat conservative assumption, we posited in our own digital transformation impact that only 10% of that would flow to bottom line. In reality, 10% of the digital transformation, the 10% of our bottom line would be impacted by digital transformation. In reality, for us, it is worth much more, especially in the long term. A company like ours absolutely need to transform to become a digital company and use a lot more of the digital tools. So for us, the impact to bottom line is way more than 10% of the total bottom line that we have, especially over the long period. We try to be very conservative. So this is a very conservative expectation that we baked into this model. The last one is the impact on revenue and the respective bottom line impact. Obviously, top line drives bottom line as long as the cost structure doesn't change. So this is another well-deserved, in my opinion, strong assumption. We have observed from longitudinal data that the employee engagement correlates with learning. If you look at Gallup, for example, they've shown that high engagement delivers productivity gains, and productivity gains deliver bottom line gains. We somewhat downplay the actual effect, estimating that only 10% of the potential revenue uplift would be harnessed. Again, 90% dilution, something happens and doesn't flow to bottom line. 90% out, 10% is in there. But the number is actually quite significant. If you look at the total, for a company like us, the impact to bottom line per year can easily be in the region of, say, $13 million per year. Look, very directional estimates. This is no financial information that I'm sharing with anyone, but this is the way we can estimate, we can calculate. Right? And so $30 million per year, bottom line, is roughly 500 basis points of EBITDA, roughly. Again, it can be a little more, a little less. Again, this is not a financial estimate. But this is big enough for any CEO and any board to pay attention to what you're doing, okay? Especially when you consider that all the assumptions and all the estimates that are made are very conservative, and I'll tell you more about it. So that's even before we account for the value of enhanced culture. Right? Obviously, a company that is able to learn, a learning organization has a better, more future-oriented and more resilient culture that yields other advantages, strategic advantages. We didn't model any of that. But that's quite important for CEOs. That's actually what they spend a ton of time. Also, ESG. Environmental, social, and governance parameters absolutely benefit from the kind of things that we could do in reskilling. Right? A company with very strong reskilling architectures scores way better on ESG parameters, which, by the way, by now are really important for the financial community. Okay, so even for the most conservative CFO, so at the end of the day, this is about reallocation of money, trying to find the funds, trying to measure the return on investment, even for the most Luddite of the CFOs. These are numbers that are big enough to make them think differently about this cost item. The last thing I will leave you with, which is super important to CFOs, CEOs, and board, is the profit earning multiples, PE ratios. Companies with a strong reskilling architecture will have, in my opinion, again, based on whatever we talked about now, a lot more growth potential, a lot more resiliency potential, which typically yields a better PE ratio in the company. Of course, the model that we looked at is partial, is inaccurate, is based on estimates. I'm personally open to all input and critique, and I think as a learning community, as an HR community, as a leadership community, we need to be on this. We need to provide each other with feedback that makes this better. But the answer cannot be that there are too many assumptions. Well, the reality is I've been running innovation and product organizations for most of my career. Everybody puts down expectations, assumptions, creates business cases that are based on all of those. That's the only way you get money to change the world. If you don't do that, you do not change the world. So whoever is trying to do an accounting job to reskilling and learning will actually end up with a self-fulfilling prophecy. A little bit of money here will not change the world. So it's important to structure that conversation so that we can attract the capital that we need. So I do think that even in the current form, which is incomplete, primitive, you call this model whatever you want to call it, I think this is a good conversation, more than a conversation starter. It's a structuring of a conversation that could help the learning organization have that discussion with the CEO and the board to make sure that we end up not being penny wise and pound foolish and really not missing the forest for the tree. So I think so far, in my opinion, the learning community has missed forest for the tree when it comes to investment reallocation. Misha, it was a great pleasure. I wish you and all the participants a great summit.
Wow, wasn't that inspiring? And that's the reason I actually enjoy working with Gianni. He's such a bold, futuristic, forward thinker, very unconventional. So, where most of the learning and development community was really focused on individual skilling, he came up with collective intelligence and talked about, well, the white spaces really in an organization are the cross-functional teams. And the focus, therefore, ought to be on interoperability. How can teams work together? And the real premise of that is that individuals don't have skills, teams have skills. But there are many, many, many nuggets and gems of wisdom in that brief presentation by Gianni. How can we be more bold, be more real, take a real partnering approach with business? Not be afraid of preparing estimates that are based on assumptions. Use academic models that have existed for the longest period and be in a position to collect data today to be able to model that and prepare and present that with boards and CEOs. Clearly, right, many advantages of being a learning organization, intangible and tangible, be it the improved engagement that leads to higher productivity or the reduction in the cost of attrition, or the near readiness of deployment, because now you're nearly ready from day one because you've invested in skilling and reskilling. And there couldn't be a better time because all the research that we've seen, whether it's Gallup that talks about 2/3 of the workforce globally is disengaged, or then we look at clearly the opportunity in terms of the benefits of being a learning organization, be it in terms of innovation or in terms of profitability or in terms of capability. And clearly a more capable organization will outperform its competitors. That's always been the premise of learning and development. It never existed on its own merit. It always existed to make the organization perform at higher levels. With that, we're going to take a quick break and come back at 2:40 p.m. Don't miss that session with Shiv Kumar with the unveiling of the LHI report.